Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Please take your seats. We are in Switzerland, and I think it's a tradition here to start in time. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, good morning, and a very warm welcome to our session this morning, the High-Level Dialogue for Asia and the Pacific Region on Effective Results and Capital Flows for Climate Actions. We have an exciting lineup of speakers, just 1 hour's time, so I suggest we get started. My name is Melanie Ulrich. I am the Senior External Relations Specialist at ADB's European Representative Office, and it's my great pleasure to welcome you to our session. It's great to see so many familiar faces. Some of them we just met yesterday, but some of them we know for a very long time. Allow me to run you through the setup of the next hour. We will first hear from His Excellency Mr. Antonio Freitas, Vice Minister at the Ministry of Finance of Timor-Leste. He is also the alternate governor for ADB. We will then have a panel discussion with His Excellency Dr. Taufik Hanafi, Executive Secretary at the Ministry of National Development Planning, Bappenas, Indonesia, joined by Ms. Veronica Giusti-Keller, Head of Impact Management of Blue Orchard, a pioneer in impact investment, and Mr. Oman Diao from the Philippines. Oman is the Executive Director of the Association of Foundations, which is a network of NGOs and foundations working in the Philippines. We are also hoping to get your questions from this floor and also virtually, so please feel free to raise your hands later or send them in through the app. And of course, we have a moderator. I'm pleased to introduce and hand over to Mr. Robert Schöllhammer. He is ADB's representative for Europe. Robert, over to you.
Thank you. Good morning, and thank you very much for joining us this early morning on here in snowy Geneva. From ADB's side, where this topic of aid effectiveness is really quite a vital topic. We have ADB, as you well know, I think, works in developing Asia and the Pacific. It's a region which has been very badly buffeted by the pandemic. There are many impacts from the Russian invasion of Ukraine, many problems with capital outflows, inflation, a whole host of issues. And then, of course, there is that very central problem of climate change, which I think is very universally accepted now as one of the key challenges. We've also faced a situation where donor budgets are tight and skepticism towards aid is increasing in many countries as well. So maybe just a few words on where Asia stands as part of this puzzle of aid effectiveness. One, our president, Mr. Masa Asakawa, has said that the battle against climate change will be won or lost in Asia and the Pacific. And this is a region with 60% of the world's population. It's a region with we estimate $1.7 trillion per year of infrastructure needs, of which only roughly half is met. This is, it's also a region where I think it's 1.7 billion people don't have access to clean cooking. So many challenges for policymakers. From a climate change perspective, Asia, 66% of electricity comes from coal. So a lot has to be done in this particular region. Now, on climate finance, a lot of the discussions, of course, are driven by funding. 100 billion per year as a target, creation of new global funds. ADB set its own $100 billion target from now until 2030, making us actually one of the biggest public financiers of climate change. And money is important because without yen and dollars and euro and other currencies, nothing will be achieved. But we know we're behind target in these funding flows. We know that we've been put off course by COVID, and we know that there are many competing priorities. But one thing that we do know as a development bank is that money follows success. But what is success? What does it mean for? What does it mean for? Most importantly, in our case, our developing member countries, what works for them? There is not a soul in ADB who wants to fund a project which is not good or mediocre. We want to fund the best operations. But what are they? So I think we're particularly delighted here today to have many different perspectives from people who are extremely well positioned to say exactly that. What works in the context of climate change? What is most effective? And how will that lead to investment? So with that introduction, I would like to turn over to the next part of our agenda. And if I could turn to the Vice Minister, if we could invite you to start with your remarks from Timor-Leste, please. Vice Minister of Finance, as Melinda has introduced. Thank you.
Robert, thank you for opportunity. Excellency, ladies and gentlemen, I'm starting to thank you, organizer, this session, for inviting me to deliver opening remarks in this high-level dialogue for ASEAN and Pacific region on effective result and capital flows climate action. This forum, high-level dialogue, is very important and timely. Allow me on this opportunity to share the Timor-Leste experience related to the capital flows for the climate actions. Ladies and gentlemen, Timor-Leste is one of the new country we affect, especially on the climate change, being witnessed in the Timor-Leste. In the recent year, the country has faced the devastating floods. The flooding caused by the Cyclone Serosa in April last year was the worst in the country's history. While we are one of the lowest contributors to global climate change, Timor-Leste emissions make up 0.003%. We are the victims with increased high temperatures and erratic rainfalls. More severe and frequent droughts also are a major challenge. Those scaling up climate actions in more urgent than ever to safeguard our development and increase resilience of our vulnerable community. Timor-Leste ratified the Paris Agreement and submit the fresh intention nationally determination on the contribution in 2017. In 2021, we submitted our National Adaptation Plan on the climate change. At the COP26, we discussed cooperation with Portugal on the climate change and the ocean. We are happy our request in the Glasgow lead to the consideration of the setting up of the Loss and Damage Fund at the recent COP27 in Egypt. We just published our national determined contribution in 2022-2013, which include 4 commitment areas. I can namely climate risk governance, natural positive growth and then transition, low carbon development, and climate change adaptation and resilience building. Finance will play critical role going forward, and the 3 things are critical to ensure the finance is enable a climate smart transition. First, develop a target, classification, and sustainable measuring for the impact of the climate action. It is important to integrate this into the development of planning and budgeting process to identify the public investment and private sector investment. In Timor-Leste, government initiatives include effort to digitalize historical climate data to establish the climate data management system, strengthening the capacity on agrometeorology, include installation of the weather station, climate risk information service, and vulnerability mapping to sectoral, institutional, and hazard assessment. Second, move beyond individual climate project and align entire financial flow with the climate action. In line with the Paris goal on finance, climate risks and resilience need to be integrated in fiscal sustainability analysis, public investment management system, and procurement system, while will enable identified and then prioritize the climate responsive investment in every sector. In case of the Timor-Leste, the NAP and the recent economic recovery plans highlighted the prioritization in the agriculture and addressing environmental issue. We have commitment to mainstream the climate change adaptation in action plan for all sectors. Third, ensure effective outcome in the climate actions. While the quantity in the finance is critical, equally important to the climate finance contribution to effective outcome. We need to ensure the good understanding of the medium and the long-term risks, its impact across the system, focus in reductions, especially promote the inclusive and decision-making process. In case of the Timor-Leste, with the limit data, need to be institutionalized, strengthening, and then systematic action climate change. To conclude my remarks, I use this forum to appeal and then put on the table for consideration the support of the development partner for implementation of the NAP across each of the 4 priority program icon, namely, and then this is very important, to strengthen the human capacity development, institutionally strengthening regulatory modification, and research. I also like to thank you, ADB, and also other development partners, especially the government of Japan, for support already given, included the climate resilience as the key component of the physical infrastructure project and institutional strengthening. It is vital to increase the evidence base and the donor support for implementation of the NDC through the centralized database, all vulnerability risk assessment, as well climate change adaptation. Indeed, this will help ensure no one is left behind from the climate actions. Together we can. Obrigado, Barak. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Vice Minister, for so in a very articulate way spelling out what climate change means for your country, for Timor-Leste. And I'm always struck how the story is so different. Whether it's Timor-Leste or Mongolia or Tajikistan, the story is always different. What does climate change action mean? And that means that if the story is different, our response has to be customized. And I think thank you also for bringing out these realities of what's needed, including data, including weather stations. So thank you for painting that very concrete, real picture about the needs of your country. And ADB has been very happy to work there and to continue support. So thank you very much for that. So, ladies and gentlemen, if we can turn to the next portion of our session today, to the panel. I'm really delighted to be here with so many wonderful pairs of eyes to look at climate change in Asia through many different prisms. The private sector, and Blue Orchard being a close partner also of ADB. Indonesia, of course, the current chair of the G20, and representing one of the most active and vibrant civil societies in the world. Think from the Philippines, the NGOs, and that civil society voice, which is so crucial. So I wonder if I could start, please, from the Indonesian perspective, if I might. I wonder if you could share particularly some of your experiences as the current G20 chair on this whole debate about how do you make climate change work? What is needed? What is and as this is an aid effectiveness summit, what is the role of aid in all of that? So, please.
Thank you, Robert. Very good morning. Excellencies, distinguished panelists, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to take the opportunity to share about Indonesia's efforts in implementing the climate agenda. As the largest archipelagic country in the world, we are vulnerable to hydrometeorological disaster triggered by climate change. A study has predicted we could lose around 40% of our GDP by 2050 if the climate change is not immediately resolved. That, I think, is the theme of our meeting this morning is very important. Our commitment to the climate agenda is reflected in the ratification of the UNFCCC, the Kyoto Protocol, the Paris Agreement, and since 2020, we have transformed our focus from only reducing greenhouse gas emission to more holistic low carbon development initiative, LCDI, and climate resilient policy contributing to SDGs goals number 13. We also believe that the green economy is a game changer for achieving Golden Indonesia's Vision 2045 and economic transformation. One of the important initiatives carried out by Indonesia is organizing what we call the workshop on advancing development cooperation on reducing marine debris in the Pacific regions. It's a collaboration program between the Ministry of National Development Planning, the Asian Development Bank in May 2019 in Nadi, Fiji. I think it's an important initiative. These collaborations resulted a letter of intent containing the commitment of both parties to collaborate in the South-South and triangular cooperation in the Pacific regions. The collaboration will include technical support and knowledge sharing for marine plastic debris solution. And we also make important effort to connect the triangular cooperation to support the climate agenda, one of which is through G20 working group commitment, the G20 roadmap for stronger recovery and resilience in developing countries, which was agreed upon by Indonesian leadership in the development working group. Of course, this also includes South-South and triangular cooperation in the field of the climate agenda as one of the joint action. As Excellencies Vice Minister Antonia mentioned about the importance of the data in supporting evidence-based policy, Indonesia recognizes the importance of integrative data in development cooperation. We also very committed to support the establishment of the United Nations Global Pulse Asia Pacific Data Hub and Center of Data of Excellence to scale up data uses for decision support and policy making in Asia Pacific. Of course, Indonesia is committed to strengthen our cooperation with the international agency, including Asian Development Bank and multilateral institution, and of course with non-state actors. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Taufik. And also, Indonesia is now, whatever climate meeting I go to, Indonesia is very front and center. Also from ADB's side, we're really excited to be working with you on really innovative projects like the energy transition mechanism, buying up old coal-fired power plants and retiring them. So a lot is there. And So in my experience, for example, at the COP, Indonesia is very often seen from a mitigation perspective. But thank you also for underscoring the vulnerability to disasters. This is something Asia has the largest number of disaster-prone countries in the world, Philippines as well, I think, no doubt. And again, thank you for talking about the needs for institutions. We need data, but how does that data come about? Is it working with the civil service? Is it working with the civil society? So these are very important questions as we talk about that 100 billion target per year. What is it spent for? And you also touch very importantly on the importance of knowledge, that triangular cooperation. It's not all about money. It's also about knowing how to do things, not least in things like plastics. So thank you very much. And Veronica, maybe I could turn to you. I've been involved with climate finance for a long, long time. And there's this lovely slogan I've heard so many times, billions to trillions. That a bit of public sector money will lead to trillions of dollars of private sector money. The private sector will just come in, fill the gap, and we're done. But now, Blue Orchard has really exciting projects, we know that, including in Asia Pacific. And it'd be very good to hear your perspective. What does it take for you as an investor, put your money in, and what does it take for that, to reach that grand ambition of getting the private sector involved to work on climate funding in developing member countries?
Oh, thank you. Very interesting question. I'll just start briefly by introducing what we do in Blue Orchard. We are a private global impact asset manager. We started operating over 20 years ago, and mainly we operate in developing and frontier markets. That's really the basis of our impact investing. We started with microfinance, and our climate finance sort of adventure started in 2015 with a climate adaptation strategy. I mean, it's amazing to hear all these stories from the different countries. I mean, for me also, it's so important. I mean, climate finance, there's a lot more funding going through climate mitigation. At the time when we started this adventure on climate adaptation fund, it was very little going here. So for us, it was super important. We could also see through our other activities how climate was really damaging, even on our microfinance products, because clearly if there's a disaster, your ability to repay back a loan diminishes. So we could see as well all of this and the needs that we had. And we started, with the Inso Resilience Investment Fund. This was an initiative really by the German government and through KfW. And and what we tried to create was this blended finance product. And really, in really basic terms, it means taking this donor capital that we had, and instead of just putting it somewhere to just, in a specific project, what we wanted was to use it to catalyze private investments. As you say, you need so much money to reach Paris Agreement goals. We're falling behind, so we are actually trying very hard to attract as much private capital as possible. And for us, this was a project that really wanted to increase climate insurance for the poor and vulnerable and to medium and small enterprises. So this was really the main goal of this fund, and also all in ODA countries. And this product barely existed. And when it did exist, it was mainly done through really the big players in the countries. So it was a challenge. It was a product that, there was no other fund that was tackling just climate insurance for the poor and vulnerable. So we had to create this market alone. And this money, so what we did was we built a portfolio, and on the capital structure side, what you do is with the same portfolio, you build different structures so that the risks are different and the returns are also different. And this way, because private investors, they will be concerned to invest in, countries that are not investment grade. They want a specific return, and they're afraid to start completely from scratch on a strategy that you had never tested before. So in this particular case, the subordinated shares of the fund, there were roughly 30% of this initiative. And it really allowed us to increase, and we did manage to get to two sub-funds, one that invests in debt, another one that invests in equity of over 200 million. And now we can say that it was very successful. It was also successful because we had a technical assistance capacity that was with the fund that also has allowed us to, here we had, again, to develop a market that didn't exist. We had to support investees developing different things, doing market studies, training their staff, among various other things. Also, it's interesting, the different needs that you have that have been mentioned before. So also here we had different needs to tackle what we wanted to go. So if you look at the portfolio that we have on this Energy Resilience Investment Fund, we are funding insurance companies to develop the product. We need this climate insurance product. We are funding distributors. We partner with many microfinance institutions that had the access to the poor and vulnerable that we wanted to reach. But we also needed data, as has been mentioned. So, for example, we are funding this company in India that provides and installs weather stations. The data that comes from these weather stations then goes to these insurance companies and allows and enables this climate insurance product to happen. So it's very much trying to understand the needs of the different markets that have been set and build this product. Now, in this particular fund, we also have sort of a premium support facility. Climate insurance is normally in developed countries really highly subsidized, and sometimes, to overcome some initial costs also for the insurance companies, you need some subsidies. So, it's a lot of work to be done before this is approved, but it also facilitates the creation of this product. And just to say, we are now, with the success of this, there were many struggles in between, but with the success of this, now we're launching part 2 of this Energy Resilience Investment Fund. And also to say, this 30% that I mentioned before that we felt it was needed to attract this private capital, now in this second version, it's only 15%. So we have now built track record, and with less sort of donor money, we're attracting more private investments. So sometimes it's not, the catalyzing effect is not just on the private capital that you bring for that fund, but also for future, because you're building track record. And if you do, if fund managers like us, we do a good job in, managing risks, etc., and returns, and we can provide, a good story to our private investors, we can, keep attracting more and more.
Thank you very much, Veronica. And it's one thing that really struck me is the way you very clearly paint the world of private finance in developing countries in climate. And it's quite different. For you, I think I've been in aid, in the aid sector quite a long time. And very often we have terminology like beneficiaries. I think you've got clients. You're talking about people who go out and get insurance products. And they go to a financial institution and they buy an insurance product. And these are a different range of institutions from, for example, an aid organization meeting with a government. This is not a patriarchal type of system. This is a system based on empowering people. And I think the link you mentioned, that it was this blended finance from KfW, which also helps to move this. I think that's a very important dimension as well. So thank you very much for describing this world of the private sector, which is not always how aid-based discussions are run. So thank you very much. I think we can come back to some of these points, and maybe we could move to you, Arman. And I lived in the Philippines for 9 years in total, so I know only too well how really vibrant the dialogue and the engagement of people is there. I think as we talked, Philippines is also the most disaster hit country, I believe, on the planet. But it's also a major economy. So it'd be very interesting to get your perspective in your work with people across that large and very beautiful country, how you see things. And speaking for the people whom your members represent, it'd be wonderful to get your perspective as well.
Thank you, Robert. So I represent the Association of Foundations. It's actually a network and a membership association of NGOs and civil society organizations in the Philippines. I need to define the term foundations because in an international scene, foundations are normally seen as grant making, funding, and basically providing for funds for civil society organizations. Our membership association is really a blend. It's both civil society organizations, corporate foundations, family foundations. So it's a mixture of funding, grant making, operating, and implementing. Our membership is probably the largest and the most diverse as far as our network in the country is concerned, and therefore we go into different kinds of programs that actually are being delivered in different and various communities all over the country. The top programs are normally education, health, environment, emergency response, DRRM, or disaster risk and reduction management. When I was talking to some of our members that are dealing with environment and climate change, one of the things that they have mentioned really is that how important it is to be able to build the capacities of communities, of the ones that will be and severely affected when typhoons, earthquakes, and various kinds of disasters happen. And unfortunately, the Philippines is one of the most favorite, landfall areas of typhoons. I'm sure if you, a decade ago, you still remember Typhoon Haiyan, locally named as Yolanda, which basically battered, almost the whole of Visayas. And that has basically woke us up in terms of how important and not anymore talking about climate change, but really talking about a climate emergency and a climate crisis. So going back to the communities and because they're the ones who actually are and will be affected as far as disasters are concerned, and this whole idea of climate crisis. This whole idea of trying to support and build the capacities for them to be ready and for them to be able to wake up again and be able to help themselves be able to recover from such disasters. And the more that our members talk to the communities, they talk about listening more actively to what they have to say. And these are, of course, the indigenous peoples, the most vulnerable groups, and they come from different languages. In the Philippines, we actually it's not a one single language. It's really different languages in different provinces, in different areas, and even that whole idea of education and even trying to make them understand how this whole climate crisis is happening right now. But the problem, I think, is really more that there are competing priorities. And as we listen more to our households and families, climate is not on top. When you listen more, it's always, where do I get food for today, for my next meal? Where is my livelihood? How is my health care? And therefore, it's that whole intersectionality of poverty, climate crisis, healthcare, and it's such a complex situation. And for these communities, it's really not more topmost that I have to prepare for a disaster, but really more, how do I take care of my family? How can I have a job tomorrow? And more so when disasters happen, what next? And so this whole idea of the nexus of climate, poverty, education, health, livelihood, which is basically the whole of SDGs, if you think about it, and how to be able to try to, to prepare and even try to uplift, the most vulnerable, the most disadvantaged, the less privileged of our communities. And I think that's where the difficulty lies. How to be able to listen more and how to be able to explain exactly what needs to be done when there are simply more basic needs and necessities that basically overshadow climate, and there are just really pressing and urgent needs that need to be addressed. So, what could be a probable solution? The probable solution, after painting that kind of a very dire picture, the probable solution would be basically helping the communities, capacity building, providing for education, healthcare, and then hopefully being able to prioritize climate at a certain point, or even trying to be able to support all of these programs in such a manner that they can be addressed holistically. I'll stop there for now.
Thank you very much, Aman. And I think that you raised some really important points. I'm being at COP26 in Glasgow. Of course, everybody says climate is the most urgent, but you've got daily food security, energy prices going up. I mean, how to manage this complexity? And I think that's one extremely critical theme. But I think also, as you talked about, Veronica, there's this theme of empowerment. It's we need, as you mentioned, we need to work with communities, help them to help themselves. And I think that is something which, after many decades in aid, I think we sometimes do have a bit of that paternalistic view of things, the beneficiaries, and we will work with the government, give a loan. It's a bit simplistic. So, and I really like the point you made about education. If in my office, if you look at the climate posters we've got, they tend to be solar panels and windmills and so forth. But we know what is the role of education. Education has a critical role in climate change. So, yeah.
One of the, I'm really listening to your interesting comments, because at Blue Orchard, when we were developing this Resilient Investment Fund, after 5 years of operations, we used this technical assistance, capacity that we had, to do a survey to hear from our end beneficiaries. The fund is reaching over 40 million beneficiaries as of the recent, last time I checked the reports. And we wanted to hear from them. So how is it, are you finding it useful? How is it useful? So there was a survey with around 30 questions that we asked. And in a couple of countries, one was Pakistan. I was through a financial institution that is a distributor of this climate insurance product that focuses on women in Pakistan. And one of the, first of all, you want to know if you are really targeting and reaching the target that you had, meaning the poor and vulnerable. So there are basic things that you can check, to make sure that your investment is going into the right place. And also there are lessons to be learned. And one of the interesting outcomes was that this woman, that they had this insurance product linked to their loan in this microfinance institution. And when disaster happened, they were surprised to see that they had insurance covered for their cattle. And this is not good for us, because we want them to know, especially if a disaster did happen. A climate disaster did happen this year in the country, unfortunately. But we want them to be aware that the product exists, and we want them to be aware that, if something happens, you can use it and it will help you to cover A, B, C, D. And so based on these results, we could also then do this education part that you're mentioning. So it's, in the end, it's all somehow linked, and it's important also to be aware of the needs that you have and to learn and to adjust in the process, no?
Yeah, thank you very much, and for bringing in exactly the Pakistan example. Also, this role of technical assistance. This is something which Again, we have our own targets in ADB, $100 billion. And that is important. You want to buy things, you want to fund things, but that, coming back to that point about knowledge, it's so incredibly important. What you can do with a relatively small technical assistance, to get that message out, to empower people, then maybe that's the ultimate catalytic event. But maybe I could ask Taufik, you're representing a planning body of a very large country, and your to-do list must not be short currently. So I was wondering from that perspective, how do you manage this complexity, dealing with all sorts of the type of issues that you raised, Norman? The need to get out and about, to bring in the private sector, invest publicly, deal with ADBs. How do you manage all this?
Yeah, thank you, Robert. In response to the climate change, we put the agenda not only in the annual plan, but we also put on the medium-term development plan. It's very interesting because yesterday, actually, the Monday morning, 6 hours different with Geneva, we, Ministry of Planning, conducting the what we call the public consultation meeting in formulating the next 2024 development agenda. We also invited non-state actors, academia from universities, communities, and also not limited to the land ministries, but also local governments, to give thought inputs how to respond to that unprecedented challenges, including in the climate agenda. I think the inclusive partnership is very essential in response to the climate agenda. And you also mentioned the importance of education. Education is not limited to formal education, but also non-formal education. And also, we believe that introducing the importance of the climate agenda, it's starting from the early child education. I think it's also very important to make sure that the understanding, the knowledge about the climate agenda is also understood very well, starting at the very beginning.
Yeah, thank you very much, Taufik. And I started out in the education sector myself a long time back. And actually the highest return to investment of any stage of education, it's not tertiary education, it's actually early childhood. You get them when they're young. And this is, I think, the type of thinking in ADB which we also want to hear and act on. It's not just about buying goods, works, and services. It's also about how do you get to that education, formal, non-formal. I think Antonio, you mentioned the situation with agriculture in Timor-Leste with this burgeoning coffee industry. That's also what is the role there of outreach for more productive production? So I would just. Maybe I could just, Mercedes, I think we need to wrap up the panel time-wise. But maybe I could ask each of the panelists just to have a very quick closing statement, just really as a message on what role aid plays in all of this. We've talked actually a lot about what empowering communities, empowering people to become customers, not beneficiaries. We've talked about government managing that complexity. Actually, the role of aid is pretty small. That statistic I mentioned, how much is it? $881 billion worth of investment per year in infrastructure. That's done. The multilateral development banks provide 10% of that. Not small, but the vast majority is done elsewhere. So maybe I could start with you, Veronica. For your work, how important is the work of this summit here? What role does aid play in that?
For us is very important. I would say twofold. So one is on building these blended finance structures. We're now looking into building one, for decarbonization in Asia and working, with green finance to SMEs in Asia. So, and we're looking to create a blended finance. So we're in the process of doing that. And it just catalyzes more private capital. So for us, it's important. And then second is on the technical assistance part. And it's very important. Now, for our sustainable infrastructure, we see, there are, many social and environmental risks when you go ahead on these products. So we need environmental and social assessment. So we need that pre-investment. We also need a management system at these companies that sometimes don't have the capacity to do. We need action plans, and these, don't come as such. There are a lot of work. You need teams behind, and normally we use technical assistance for that. So it's very, very important to get that for us.
Thank you. So blended finance, technical assistance, and also that the data, knowing, understanding. And Oman, maybe you could comment on from your perspective.
Well, I mentioned communities a while back, and I wanted to go back into that. Them not as victims or survivors, but really more as the one who actually support and preserve environment as well. At the end of the day, it's them who are in the forest areas. It's them who are in the mangroves. It's them who are in the beaches, in the coastline communities, and so we should look at them more as people who can actually support the environment in the long term. If we look at the term sustainability, we're really looking at these communities as the ones who will be able to preserve and conserve environment. On the role of aid, I think. Let's talk about the World Bank, ADB, both bilateral agencies, multilateral agencies. I think one of the things that they can, the first thing that I think that they could do is their convening function. It's a convening role that I think that they can invite various stakeholders, and in this kind of a problem which cannot be solved by a single person or single organization alone, that whole collaboration and partnership between and among civil society, foundations, philanthropy, local government units, non-state actors, national government agencies, private sector, impact investments. It's that kind of a convening role that I think we can hold in local situations where direct action can actually be done better. And these kinds of conversations, I think, should be happening more on the ground, and really how it can actually affect the things that really matter as far as our communities are concerned.
Yeah, thank you very much, Oman. I'm sure he won't mind my saying so, but yesterday we met with the alternate governor for Switzerland to ADB, and we were talking about going from lower to middle income status. It's not easy, but most Asian countries have done that. The big jump, the big difficulty is middle to high. And I think at Switzerland, very rich, stable, etc. I remember one point he said it was, it's about bringing people together. It's about bringing all elements of society, private, civil society, government, local, bring them together. I think it was very much your point there, Oman. But Taufik, can we give you the last word? And,
Yes, thank you, Robert. As I mentioned yesterday in the afternoon sessions about the importance of the inclusive partnership, I would like to emphasize the inclusive partnership is very essential in response to the unprecedented climate change agenda to be more effective. And the second, I would like to also underscore about the importance of integrated data. That's why the government of Indonesia is committed to the establishment of the United Nations Global Pulse Asia Pacific Data Hub and a center of data excellence to scale up data usage for decision support and policymaking in Asia Pacific. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. So this closes this particular session. So please join me in a round of applause for the panel. And I believe, please stay on stage. I think we have 2 more interventions, and then we'll have questions and answers, which will be addressed to you if time permits. We've heard from Timor-Leste, the Pacific. We've heard from Southeast Asia, Philippines, from Indonesia, from your work in Pakistan. And now could we turn to Tajikistan, from a voice from Central Asia, a country which is very active in the field of climate change. We have a very strong partnership with Tajikistan. So First Deputy Minister, if I could invite you to the stage for your address.
Thank you very much, Mr. Robert. Dear distinguished colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the government of Tajikistan, I would like to express my gratitude to the government of Switzerland, the UN structural organizations, for the fruitful cooperation in the framework of the global partnerships for effective development cooperation to achieve the 2030 agenda, and also for arrangement of this important event. And my special thanks to the Asian Development Bank for organizing this high-level dialogue for Asia and Pacific region in this important topic, which is the climate change. We consider improving the quality, impact, and effectiveness of all of types of the development cooperation is crucial to ensuring the sustainable development goals are achieved. Government of the Republic of Tajikistan committed to continue collaboration towards building back better to the crisis, paying much attention on ensuring sustainable development agenda, including sustainable development goals. It should be reminded that the Republic of Tajikistan, one of the pilot countries, presented its National Progress Report on SDGs at the United Nations headquarters in 2018. And according to the Rapid Integrated Assessment, 78% of SDG targets are reflected in the National Development Strategy of Tajikistan for the period up to 2030. Dear colleagues, I would like to mention that at the initiative of Tajikistan, the United Nations General Assembly adopted 8 resolutions related to water. Resolutions on declaring 2003 International Year of Water, Clean Water, 2005-2015 as the International Decade of Action Water for Life, 2013 as the International Year of Water Cooperation are among our global initiatives. In this context, on the next initiative of the country, the UN General Assembly adopted the resolution on the International Decade of Action Water for Sustainable Development for the years 2018 and 2028. In June this year, we held the second Dushanbe Conference on the International Decade of Action Water for Sustainable Development. This conference has developed key messages for the UN Water Conference in 2023, within the framework of which the progress towards achieving the goals of this decade will be evaluated. Leaders of the Water and Climate Coalition, of which Tajikistan is an active member, approved their action plan at the Dushanbe meeting, which includes different initiatives in this direction. Our country, 93% of those territory is the mountainous, is one of the main source of water resources in Central Asia. At the same time, 60% of the region's water resources originated in the glaciers of Tajikistan. Intensive melting of glaciers as a result of climate change poses a serious threat to the process of ensuring favorable living conditions for the population and protecting water resources. Suffice it to say that out of 14,000 glaciers in the Tajikistan, which are of vital importance for the entire region, more than 1,000 small glaciers have disappeared over the past 30 years. Natural disasters related to water only in the summer of this year caused hundreds of millions of dollars of damage to the population and economy of the country. Unfortunately, there was also human casualties. In this regard, the proposal of the founder of Peace and National Unity, leader of the nation, President of the Republic of Tajikistan, His Excellency Mr. Emomali Rahmon, to declare 2025 as the International Year of Glaciers Protection is currently under discussion at the United Nations. And we invite all of our esteemed partners to further support this proposal and establishment of the fund on the protection of glaciers. As a part of our efforts to prepare for the United Nations Water Conference, we presented water and climate cooperation as one of its main topics. Our efforts within the framework of the Sharm el-Sheikh Summit are also aimed at raising the international community's attention to the key role of the water resources in achieving climate goals and calling on for modern and innovative actions in this direction. Tajikistan also has ratified Paris Agreement on the set ambitious clean energy goals, including coal phase-out policies and renewable energy and energy-efficient targets. Tajikistan is already quite green because 98% of the generated electricity is the hydro, renewable and green energy. And despite the fact that the share of the Republic of Tajikistan in the volume of the global emissions of greenhouse gases into the atmosphere is small, nevertheless, the Republic of Tajikistan, one of the vulnerable countries in the process of the climate change. Today, the main sector of the economy of Tajikistan are facing negative consequences associated with the climate change, and those our country attaches great importance to the effective use of the renewable energy sources, especially hydropower, which contributes to social economic development, adaptation of the population to climate change, and the formation of a green economy. And in this context, the Tajikistan were developed and adopted the strategy on green economy up to the period of 2037. In this regard, we also invite our esteemed partners, including our development partners, to invest in the creation of a small and medium-sized hydropower plants in country, as well as to establish the mechanism for acquiring Tajikistan quota for greenhouse gas emission. Dear colleagues, to ensure further sustainable development goal implementation, a dedicated and sustainable multi-stakeholder dialogue platform has been established to address specifically SDG financing concerns. Tajikistan is undertaking the second voluntary national review, which will be officially submitted in 2023 in a high-level political forum that meets under the auspice of ECOSOC. As mentioned, and even for yesterday's discussion, the COVID-19 crisis was a major reversal for countries to realize Agenda 2030, and the current situation in the world has further stalled recovery, and it's already have a spillover effects on global food and energy supplies, which have translated into the higher prices. We are convinced that in order to prevent the eliminating and consequences of COVID-19 and the current situation in the world, countries cannot actively, individually, and concerning to get out from the sensitive period of crisis, the joint integration and global cooperation is utmost important. In conclusion, I hope that today's event will contribute in enhancing global cooperation to recover our national economies from the global crisis consequences and to achieve sustainable development goals. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you very much, First Deputy Minister, and thank you for bringing alive Tajikistan, its commitment to climate change. And again, I think we just see this great diversity across Asia Pacific, whether it's, I think we went from mangroves in the Philippines to mountains in Tajikistan. Your stress on water, on the glaciers melting, it really does, again, underscore how much effective climate action, it's not a template, it's listening to you, it's finding out what's important for your country, what works for your people. And again, it's complexity. We hear you have floods. At the same time, you're looking for an energy transition. And we know from our own experience in hydro, it's a very difficult field, but can make a major impact, the case of Lao PDR. So thank you very much for bringing Tajikistan to us, and thank you. And maybe, could I turn please to a voice from Japan, Deputy Director General for International Cooperation of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Mr. Hideki Kusakabe. Please, Hideki-san.
Okay. Thank you, Robert, for introducing me. And good morning, and distinguished participants and panelists, ladies and gentlemen. And I would like to share some thoughts about climate change response and the effectiveness principles. As discussed by the panel, climate change is an urgent issue. In particular, decarbonization in the Asian region, where energy demand is expected to further increase with its economic growth. It's extremely important to achieve carbon neutrality in the world. The GPEDC, at this conference, effectiveness principles are very important in cooperation with partner country in the field of climate change response. Just Energy Transition Partnerships, JETP, launched on November 15th between Japan and the United States and other partner countries, and Indonesia supports Indonesia's effort in the transition from coal to renewable energy while using ADB's energy transitions mechanism. We are implementing the GPEDC's effectiveness principles, including ownership, focus on results, and inclusive partnerships, and transparent reporting in the GATP. In addition, I would like to highlight Japan's program loans to Vietnam and Indonesia. We support capacity building and institutional reform of partner countries to formulate policies on climate change, mitigations, and adaptations, and manage these progress with focus on results. In supporting energy transition, we need to fully reflect the unique circumstances, needs, and policies of our partner countries while looking at energy security, just transitions, and human security. And we will continue to apply GPEDC's this effectiveness principles in our corporations and lead the effort for response to climate change in order to achieve smooth transition to a decarbonized society and build climate resilience society. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Hideki-san. And also, we really appreciate your raising the Just Transition platform as well, because I think it comes back to the theme of the discussion so far. It's a big challenge. We need to manage that complexity. It's not just about investing in solar panels or wind power farms. It's about focusing on people. It's, as you said, it's about human security, putting people at the center of this one. And from ADB side, of course, we highly appreciate also the support that Japan has provided also to the energy transmission mechanism, which is kicking off under Indonesian leadership. And for that, we're extremely grateful. Thank you. And I'm thinking we are over time. The question is, do we have, I'm just thinking, do we have any questions we could take from the audience quickly? If we have a few minutes. I think, gentleman over there.
Thank you very much. I'm Jiten Yumnam, and I represent the Civil Society Partnership for Development Effectiveness. And it's really good to, really nice to hear the different reflections on climate action, specifically focusing on the just energy transition, and of course, reflecting on the energy. But I also want to focus that there has to be a stronger focus on the effectiveness agenda, as also highlighted from just the excellency from Japan, especially when it comes to the focus on energy aspect. It's really important because the issues of country ownership, looking into the needs of the community is really important. And also, when you look at the energy transition, the focusing on energy, you need to ensure that the financing is just and sustainable. Because just recently, there is also this reflection on some of the concern around the financing of large dam, because it can also be challenging, the financing of dams. Because building dam is not just about dam per se, but it also involves road infrastructure. It also involves the high voltage transmission and distribution line. It can also lead to other social and environmental impact. And I think this is a major cause, like in the Himalayan region, where multiple dams, multiple infrastructures. And interestingly, the challenge is, again, these are pursued as renewable energy and also as part of the climate change solution. And just reflecting on the blended finance push, I just want to focus that there has to be a stronger need for transparency and accountability, especially including for the private sector. And with respect to ADB, I think we also understand that there is an ongoing effort to update its policy, safeguard. And I think this safeguard update is also extremely important to ensure that the effectiveness agenda around the country ownership, results, and especially ensuring transparency and accountability is fully reflected in the update, policy update as well. Yeah, so I just want to reflect on that, and thank you very much. Thanks for giving me time. Thank you.
Yeah. Maybe we collect another question from the gentleman.
Thank you very much. I'm Akio from Japan, also with CPDE. I just want to make 2 comments. One is that about the data on climate finance. Of course, it's really important to have to collect data on climate finance, but and of course it includes both projects or programs that climate is the major issue, but also ones that climate is not really the major objective, but also the secondary or some other objective. So, of course, it is very good to incentivize all the donors to have climate dimensions in their aid projects and programs. But the other side of the coin is that there is always a possibility of inflating the statistics. So I think we need to find some balance somewhere to show the statistics. The other thing is about education. I think education issue was addressed in the panel, but I know that Asia Pacific, of course, or around the world, enrollment has increased in the past 20 years. Of course, under COVID, the situation is a bit serious, but there has always been a problem with education attainment and also dropouts and all the other things. So I think there are challenges there, and also it means that SDGs are really interlinked. Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you. Maybe we could just take those 2 and just one instant reaction, I think, to the role of education. I think, Taufik, you mentioned that climate is actually a game changer, and that, it's also there's commercial opportunities. It brings with it investment, and for that we need education in green jobs. If I can summarize, I think the questions were about standards, high standards of operations. High standards of investments. Everything you described about hydro and everything, that Europe has those very same discussions as well. So I think one question was on standards, one question was on data and knowing what's happening. And I wonder if I can ask our panelists if they'd like to comment on these issues, standards. Maybe Veronica, if you'd like to.
I can comment, from my role on as a private impact investor. And I mean, for us, yes, these standards, I heard so many, collecting the right data, being transparent on what you do, on sharing the results, not only the positives, but also what you're learning and any struggles that you might have. And I think over time we've built, this impact management system. It's not just to invest, okay, I want to, increase this number of beneficiaries. There's a lot behind. If in sustainable infrastructure, for example, we have to, make sure that the communities are discussed. Are there, the land, was it owned? By whom was it owned? Were there indigenous populations living there? You need to discuss with them what propositions they were given to build this project. There's a lot behind, and we need to be also, I think, cautious, act with cautious and being transparent as well towards our stakeholders. I think if we don't do this job well, also it diminishes the purpose of attracting more private capital and doing the positive impact that we want. So we are also looking always as well for new data on climate. Is very difficult, not only on the climate, sort of investments that we do, for this climate finance purpose, but also on the other investments that we do. Climate needs to be taken into account, and we're doing huge efforts, just for simple stuff on your carbon footprint of our financial institutions, for example. And it's a huge learning curve that we are doing. First we did it ourselves. I think 2022 was a huge learning curve for us to understand what's the carbon footprint of our portfolio, how are we contributing, and then starting now to engage and educate our partners that might also be willing to do, some changes on this, and getting the right data is, difficult sometimes. But if you don't act upon it, and you need, I think, to start with proxies and then with something, and then getting better over time.
Thank you. And I really like that point about we're still learning. I think, that's one key takeaway, I think, of the session. We're all learning. Switzerland, Germany, also still learning. I mean, this is still a work in progress, and we need everybody around the table. I wonder if I could ask other panelists. Hold on, please.
I probably take on the education and how important that is and how urgent it is. World Bank came up with a report just last month on the overcoming inequality and poverty in the Philippines, and it says that because of the pandemic, 50% poor households and communities have actually learned only 50% of what they normally would learn in a face-to-face attending in-person classroom. And it becomes even greater in the poorer communities by 68%. So you can just imagine the impact that COVID had on education. In the way our members and the programs that have been developed is that we normally request all of our members not just to do scholarships as what is the easiest thing to do, but really to bridge it in a full circle towards job employment, and even not just employment, but also entrepreneurship, but basically being able to have income, livelihood, and I think that's the push that we have. It's easy to have just talk about early child care development, access and quality, but really trying to close the circle as far as being employed or being in an entrepreneur and having that kind of a livelihood even after graduation.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any reaction?
Yes. Thank you. I think the education sector is were hard hit during the COVID pandemic. That's why we also, many countries experiencing what we call the learning deficits. And that's why the government of Indonesia is launched what we call the digital transformation. Make sure that the digital infrastructure is available in the archipelagic, country. So I like to emphasize that the digital transformation is one of important initiative to make sure that equitable access to education.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, and also thank you for all the comments. My apologies for my terrible timekeeping, but I wouldn't have edited anything. I think really in a relatively short space of time, I think we've heard from the picture from the ground in many different parts of Asia. What are the opportunities? What are the challenges? What can we concretely do? Including things like digital technology. Actually, we had in ADB so many requests for partnership in this new, very complicated field. So we've actually created an office only for digital technology and development. So I think at that point, I really would like to just thank our panelists, our speakers for bringing so much knowledge and wisdom and basically bringing Asia to this snowy morning here in Geneva. So thank you very much. And maybe we could just give a final round of applause to speakers and panelists. And then I come back to you, Melanie, please.
Sorry for being the party pooper, but indeed we've run over time, which is a great sign. It means just the discussion was very engaging, and we hope you found it interesting. Please do join us for a coffee outside. We have coffee, tea, water. And yes, again, thank you so much for attending and engaging with us this morning. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Sure.